we've been running, but it is also very important that we get people back into the workplace in a COVID-secure way. And unlike the Leader of Opposition, we do absolutely everything we can to give them confidence that it is a good idea to go back. And an ounce of confidence, Mr. Speaker, is worth a ton of taxpayers' money.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Bounce Back Loan Scheme has been a huge success delivered by the Prime Minister and indeed the Chancellor. 1.3 million loans being granted, vital support for SMEs. But the All-Party Group on Fair Business Banking, which I co-chair, has established there are 250,000 businesses who currently bank with fintechs and alternative lenders who do not have access to those loans because they cannot get access to the Bank of England's term funding scheme, and lenders who do have those loans are not really accepting loan applications from new customers. Would the Prime Minister use his best offices to persuade the Governor of the Bank of England to open up the term funding scheme to those alternative finance organisations, or open the doors of other lenders who can provide those schemes, those loans, to other SMEs?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. He raises an important point. Those, as he will know, the rules around access to schemes for alternative finance are not the responsibility of my right honourable friend the Chancellor, but for the Bank of England. But I'm sure the Governor will have heard him today.
We now come to Owen Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the summer months, many people undertake a range of activities. For some, it's camping. For others, it's festivals and events. In my Midlothian constituency, we've got a number of highly successful employers in audiovisual technology, hospitality and creative industries, none of whom can currently undertake their normal activities. In the face of this, when furlough ends, these companies could face collapse. What should I tell them? That the government are today going to extend the scheme to make sure the industry can get back on its feet, or has the government completely given up on them?
Hear, hear. Prime Minister.
Not at all, Mr. Speaker. We've supported the arts industry alone with, I think, about £1.7 billion of support. And in Scotland, as I'm sure he never tires of saying, the overall support for tackling coronavirus has been of the order of about £4 billion. And we will continue to give support. But we happen to think, and I hope it's common ground across the House, we happen to think that it would be better for the UK economy, better for all the people that he rightly cares about, to get back into work, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, one positive among the gloom of the COVID pandemic is that this year's I'm a Celebrity will be filmed not in New South Wales, Australia, but in our own North Wales. Even if I cannot tempt the Prime Minister to take part in a Welsh token trial, would he commend ITV on its choice of venue and welcome the positive impact this can have on the regional economy?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and he's right to draw attention to the wonderful attractions of North Wales, which I know very well myself when I tried to get elected there many years ago, unsuccessfully. And I congratulate him on his success, and may it be long repeated.
Heading up to Adrian Shops with Neil Gray. Neil Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this summer, the Treasury floated a story in the Telegraph suggesting a public sector pay freeze to save money. Given so many public sector workers, such as nurses, police, firefighters, teachers and others, have put their lives on the line to fight COVID, surely this would be an unconscionable betrayal. Will the Prime Minister therefore unequivocally not only rule out a pay freeze, but commit to fully funding a package to ensure they are remunerated to reflect their sacrifices?
So I must say, I listened carefully to what the honourable gentleman said. He seems to have ignored the fact, Mr. Speaker, that we just had an inflation-busting public sector pay rise, and that nurses alone, as part of the package that we agreed in 2018, have had a 12.5% pay increase since then. I appreciate his sentiments. He's on the right lines.
We're going to break away briefly now and go to Edinburgh, where First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is giving her daily briefing on COVID-19.
228. 6 of those were registered in the previous week, which is the same number as the week before. 2 were in care homes, which is 2 fewer than the previous week. And once again, my condolences go to everyone who has lost a loved one. In the interest of public information and indeed parliamentary information, Presiding Officer, let me just briefly mention 2 other matters. Last night we announced that Greece has been added to the list of countries subject to quarantine restrictions. Test and Protect has found in recent days that a number of new COVID cases can be connected to individuals returning from that country. The new restrictions apply from 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. Anyone arriving in Scotland from Greece after that time must self-isolate for 14 days. Anyone who has returned from Greece in the past few days should be particularly careful about social interactions and follow all of the facts advice particularly carefully. Given the uncertainties inherent in a global pandemic, I also want to repeat my advice for people to be very cautious about non-essential foreign travel right now. There can be no guarantee that the rules on quarantine won't change while you're away and affect you on your return. Secondly, let me just briefly remind people living in Glasgow City, East Renfrewshire and Western Bartonshire of the new guidance in place. The level of COVID is particularly high and rising in these areas, and given the toll we know COVID can take, doing nothing was not an option. The data we now get from Test and Protect allows us to be much more targeted in the measures we take, and what we know is that unlike the pub-based cluster in Aberdeen a few weeks ago, data so far suggests that transmission in the west of Scotland is happening not exclusively but mainly in people's homes. So the guidance is now, firstly, if you live in Glasgow, East Renfrewshire and Western Bartonshire, you should not host people from other households in your home, and you should not visit someone else's home, no matter where that is. There are exceptions for emergencies, providing care or shopping to vulnerable people, and for extended households, and you can find further guidance and a Q&A at www.gov.scot. Second, if any member of your household is identified as a close contact of someone who has tested positive, we will now ask the whole household to isolate for 14 days, and local authorities are stepping up their support arrangements. And lastly, visits to care homes in these three areas is now restricted to outdoor only, and hospital visiting will return to essential visits only. These restrictions will be in place for 2 weeks and reviewed in 1 week. They've not been put in place lightly, but they are necessary and we believe proportionate, and we hope they will allow spread to be contained at an early stage without the need for further measures later. They apply only in these three council areas right now, but I think they should be a wake-up call for all of us. If we let it, this virus will spread rapidly. The good news, though, is if we all stick to some basic rules and continue to make some sacrifices, we can stop it. But bluntly, that only works if we all do these things. So please make sure you are aware of what the rules are and stick to them, and follow the facts rules. Face coverings, avoid crowded places, clean hands and hard surfaces, keep 2 metres distancing, and self-isolate and book a test if you have symptoms. All of this is more important now than it has been at any stage of this pandemic so far.
Thank you. I would just remind members that we're sticking to the format where all supplementaries to the First Minister will be asked at the end of all the questions. That is today after question 7. First question from Ruth Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, the First Minister announced plans for a referendum bill. Why is that more urgent than an education bill?
First Minister.
This government has a very well-known, well-established and well-underway programme of improvements and reform in education. Of course, we have taken additional steps to make sure that pupils catch up the education that they've lost over the COVID period. We've given additional funding to local authorities for that, and of course we are providing additional funding specifically to recruit additional teachers. Education and improving education remains the priority for this government. But on a basic matter of democracy, I believe it is for the people of Scotland to choose their own future. I'll argue that case in a democratic election. People will have the ability to decide in the way that they vote, and if they endorse my view that there should be a referendum on independence, people then will have the right to choose Scotland's future. Fundamentally, Presiding Officer, I believe in democracy. I think we now know that Ruth Davidson doesn't.
Ruth Davidson.
Well, that was First Minister's questions in Holyrood. The First Minister confirming lockdown on gatherings in homes in the Glasgow area under questioning from Ruth Davidson, who's standing in until the new Scottish Conservative leader can have a seat in the Scottish Parliament. Let's go back now to Prime Minister's questions. What has been a pretty prickly session so far.
A few years will know that they do treat local residents with I'm afraid, a high-handed approach, or have done. And what I can tell him, however, is that where there is damage to local roads, HS2 will pay compensation. I will certainly take his point up with HS2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Low public confidence and social distancing measures means many businesses are struggling. If the job retention scheme ends in October, there will be catastrophic consequences for workers, businesses and the economy. So despite earlier waffle from the Prime Minister, I'm asking him again, will he commit to extending the job retention scheme, or are we to expect more government incompetence resulting in unnecessary redundancies and further strains on our already collapsing economy?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I direct the Honourable Lady to what I've said already, which is that there will always be those who argue for an infinite extension of the furlough scheme and who want to keep people off work, unemployed, being paid very substantial sums for a very long time. I don't think that's the right thing. I think the best way forward for our country is to get people, as far as we possibly can, back into work. And there is the job retention bonus, as she knows, at the end of the year, and there are abundant schemes. Already £160 billion has been spent to support the economy throughout the crisis, and we will continue, as I said, to put our arms around the entire people to keep them going throughout this crisis. But furlough, indefinite furlough, is just not the answer.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our nation has a proud history as a safe haven for desperate souls, but now the asylum system is broken and being abused. So the people of Ashfield would like to know, when will the Prime Minister introduce legislation to fix the asylum system, which will save lives by taking back control of our borders?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and I have a great deal of sympathy with those who are so desperate as to put their children in dinghies or even children's paddling pools and try to cross the channel. But I have to say that what they are doing is falling prey to criminal gangs, and they are breaking the law. They're also undermining the legitimate claims of others who would seek asylum in this country. And that is why we will take advantage of leaving the EU by changing the Dublin regulations on returns, and we will address the rigidities in our laws that make this country, I'm afraid, a target and a magnet for those who would exploit vulnerable people in this way.
Gavin Robinson.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker, and I trust that the Prime Minister had an enjoyable visit to Hartland Wood's new yard in Appledore. He knows well the mother yard of Hartland Wood in my constituency of East Belfast, and I just ask that the Prime Minister not only recognises the important strategic purchase of Appledore, but recognise that Hartland Wood are now in an incredibly well-placed position to assist this country in our future defence needs.
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, and yes, it was incredibly exciting to go to Appledore and see the potential of that yard, and to see what Holland and Wolff is doing there. And also, of course, he's absolutely right in what he says about the potential for various other contracts, both in Devon and in Belfast. But I can't give him now the kind of guarantees that he wants over this dispatch box. But watch this space.
Mr. Blackford, you haven't given me notice of this point of order. I think it is important just to clear up this matter. It isn't normally that I would allow urgent questions to be interfered with or statements. So therefore, on this occasion, I'm going to allow it. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm most grateful. On Friday the 21st of August, the Daily Mail ran a front-page story revealing the location of the Prime Minister's holiday in Scotland. This was a violation of his family's privacy that neither myself nor my party in any way condone. Later the same day, a senior Conservative source in Downing Street told the Sun newspaper, and I quote, "The finger of blame for all this getting out is being pointed at the SNP, particularly Ian Blackford, who is local." This was something repeated in a number of newspapers and broadcast outlets. This allegation and briefing was entirely and deliberately false. It was a targeted political smear from the Prime Minister's office. The photographer who provided the material for the original Daily Mail front page later confirmed that I was not the source in revealing the Prime Minister's location. A location, I might add, I was not even aware of. However, by this point, the damage was done. This matter has not only been the worst kind of political smear, the false allegation has equally resulted in security implications for myself and my family, given its serious and personal nature. You know, I can see the Prime Minister pulling a face, but all you have to do is to go to social media and see the threats that I was then forced to witness. It is a very serious situation when the apparatus of the UK government can be deployed in this way, manufacturing false briefings in order to attack an opposition politician. I raised this issue with the Prime Minister's office in writing, however, as for any parliamentarian.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, may I first of all say what a wonderful staycation holiday I had in the Right Honourable Gentleman's constituency. What a fantastic part of the world it is, and how thoroughly I commend it to everybody. It's absolutely beautiful location. He's very lucky to represent it. On the substantive point that he raises, I'm very happy to accept the assurances that he gives. However, I just draw his attention to he talks about going to social media. I draw his attention to a tweet by a chap called Torquil Crichton on 17th of August, saying, "Ferocious midge count in Wester Ross tonight, I hear. Must be bad if you're fair-skinned and camping." And to which an account that purports to be the Right Honourable Gentleman, but I'm sure it isn't because of what he has just said, says, "I wonder if an education at Eton stands you in good stead for these blighters." Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that he had I'm happy to accept his assurances and his protestations, and I think we should leave it at that, Mr. Speaker.
What I would like to say, obviously,
Well, a prickly point of order ending what was a pretty prickly session of Prime Minister's questions. What didn't come up was an announcement from the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, during that period, announcing a change in government policy. This is what Mr. Hancock had to say. Following a significant change in the level of infection rates over the last few days, a decision has been